so intense, the color faded from the room around me. The sounds dimmed as I lowered myself to the floor to prepare for the now routine occurrence that would render my body disabled and my mind unconscious. I had come accustomed to know that my agency over either was gone. You see, early in my life, my body had gone rogue, and nobody could explain for years what was going on. As it was experimented on, traumatized, and sometimes lost, my mind did strange things. Emotions didn't register. Memories didn't form, and only a partial history got written. During those early years, and with that context, I started making art. Visual language seemed to be a place where the ambiguous, the complex, the contradictory could be dealt with in such a fuller way, for me at least, than verbal language. So I carried on with this practice, and now I work in mixed material sculpture, photography, and performance, and still deal with these questions and observations that came up those years ago when I observed that I could not trust this body, and that my perception of the world at any given moment was such a narrow lens, and that histories get written in really peculiar ways. So I carried on to continue looking at the compromised body and memory, the individual and the collective, asking how do we present, perceive, and relate to the irregular, impure, or hybrid. I was interested in things that would start to call into question the solidity of the ground that you were standing on and the ground that you were observing the work on and forming your impressions with. This is a piece that, certain volume, it's about yay high, it's sitting on that floor. You'll look at it and you'll walk out with a certain image of it. But to construct this piece, it used my breath to create the volume within a structure that could only temporarily hold it. So over the life of this piece, it goes from looking like this to looking very different. And depending on when you encountered it, the image you walk away with will be very different from somebody else. I work in multiples and collections, so that last image became this image this past year, and this one. And I often go to the place of the ambiguous or unclear. I'm interested in how you read this. What's the feeling that you look at? Are you attracted? Are you repelled? I use performance also as a way of bringing my body, that body that can't be trusted, back into making of the work to be the only tool used to create an image. I think performance is talked about, performance in the fine art context is talked about in a way that can be really alienating. But at the end of it, really what you're doing is taking the body as the main tool to make an image. And it's usually unrehearsed, it usually isn't repeated. And so if you happen to be there, you walk away with an image, or maybe you capture a still, but that only gets a bit of it. And I work these pieces until I start to see sort of the essence of a memory put outside of myself. And it's either that or looking at one of those gaps in my memory and putting something outside of myself and into the world that might start to fill one of those gaps. And then those pieces come together and form a bit of documentation. That documentation creates an archive. And as you all walk around over the next couple of days, you might see bits of that archive and wonder, what's the story? And I wrote a bit of the story, but through your interaction, you will read and write 100 very different stories.